Please welcome Tiera Skovbye, Sandy Sidhu, and Natasha Calis, stars of the new hit drama. I'm calling it a hit already because the network has bet the farm on you guys. Congratulations on this. I mean, listen, there is certainly enough real-life drama, as I said when you turn it on the news, Tiera, to see what our frontline workers are going through. Did that put pressure on you to try to, really capture what their lives are like and, in a way, compete with some of the headlines that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we actually filmed this season before COVID was around. We filmed it almost 2 years ago now. But having it come out, during everything that's going on in the world, I think for us is it's really amazing to be able to shine that spotlight on all the frontline workers because of everything that's happening.
Natasha, I can't imagine what that's like. You've shot it before this pandemic, the time that we've needed medical professionals the most. So you have your series, you're watching it in real time, but you kind of know intimately how hard the job was well before the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. I think we all found a newfound respect for nursing and how much more is involved than what you think. It's not just about medicine. It's so much so about compassion and the human connection and building relationships with your parents and being their emotional support as well. So I know going back to filming after we kind of got shut down there for a little bit, we all, there was almost this new pressure of wanting to tell these stories truthfully and wholeheartedly and do it justice to these amazing frontline workers who've been working so hard.
Sandy, you have a medical background. You studied at UBC. You have a degree in cell biology and genetics. The obvious question is, how do you go from that to acting, which is important work, don't get me wrong. It is important work, but it's a little different, just a little bit.
I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life when I was 16, 17, and I had no clue. And my mom's a nurse, and, my parents are immigrants, and I was definitely a first generation Canadian that just had a lot of empathy growing up, wanting to contribute to the world somehow. But I'd always been an artist. I'd been drawing since I was 3. I got into theater to combat shyness when I was 14. And so I just had it the other way around. And it took going to university to figure out that I was actually in my core, an artist, and that's what I wanted to do. But there was no examples around me. So I just kind of followed the route of society
Yeah.
before my heart started really calling.
Well, that's interesting. You say that your heart calling you to acting. Tiera, when you talk to medical professionals, particularly nurses, they will say that same thing. It was like a calling. It pulls them in. Do you think that's why we're so obsessed with medical dramas? Why people are already obsessed with your show, Nurses?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where unless you unfortunately find yourself in the position of being in a hospital, what happens behind, the hospital doors is something that's kind of foreign to everybody. And to see it happening and the way that nurses and doctors care for their patients, I think it's such an interesting insight to something that we don't often get to see. And I feel like that's why people kind of gravitate towards these type of shows so much.
When Nurses launched in Canada at the beginning of 2020, it became the most watched premiere episode of a scripted Canadian series in over 2 years. And now we get to see it in the States. Please welcome Jordan Johnson-Hinds and MacLean Jr., part of the cast. Thank you both for joining us. Listen, no pressure. It's a huge hit in Canada. And now, you're told by executives, this will be a winner in the U.S. as well. How did it feel to, finally get audiences to see the show?
It felt great. It felt amazing because we knew what we had. We knew we had something special. Usually Canadian shows get a little stigma attached to it. So we're coming in and we're saying we're the new generation and we're about to kick down some doors.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we did a show on the number of young men who had been studying to become doctors who pivoted to study nursing because they realized at the end of the day, the most critical component in many hospitals is not the doctor, it's the nurse. And they restructured their whole lives as a result of it. How was it for you to play a male nurse in this and really capture, I think, the untalked about sometimes part of that journey of being a male nurse?
Absolutely. I've never felt more like a man than when I was playing Wolf Burke, a male nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I felt like more in touch with my femininity, which in my opinion is is such a beautiful thing. And the reason why is because I was so vulnerable, sensitive, and empathetic to my fellow co-stars who, like, obviously in the world were my patients. And I've never, like, after that, I learned how to lead with love. And I feel like when I got to play Wolfberg the nurse, I've never felt so in touch with that side of myself.
Wow.
And I totally believe why somebody would go from being a doctor to being a nurse.
Wow.
You know, you're right by the patient.
Yeah.
Every type of patient.
You're the line you're the line of defense. Yeah.
Yes, you're their safest. You have to make them feel like they're in the safest place on earth. That is your job as a nurse.
Now, Jordan, your character, Keon, makes some big mistakes in the first episode. So we already now have ourselves a storyline that is intriguing. Where are we going with this guy? What's going on with him?
I mean, Keon is an ex-college football star, and he decided that he wanted to help people instead of hurt them after a freak accident on the field. He injured an opponent, and I think throughout the season we see how he kind of grapples and overcomes these obstacles with this newfound love and profession that he stepped into, and he goes through things that he's never expected. You thought football was hard, like working in an ER hospital is even harder. It's life and death.
Well, I know people are excited about the show, finally being able to see it, and what timing to have a show like this. Congratulations on your premiere, Jordan and Donald. And by the way, you can catch Nurses on NBC next Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern, and then Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern beginning January 5th.